Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Emergency Council meeting for September 28th. We're going to give just a minute or two to let everyone in. While we're doing that, I'm also going to go through and make all of the Climate Emergency Council members co-hosts for this meeting. And I'm also going to make it so that it says VCCEC after your name. So I'll do that for each of you. And we'll just wait a moment or two while we get those going.
Hi there, everybody.
Hi,
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi. It helps to unmute.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and continue. Let's see. I'm going to take a quick head count, see how many people we look like we've got here, because I think we're actually pretty close. I think. Ooh. It looks like we may have everyone that we expect to have for the day. It looks like Florencia is here. So that was the last one that I hadn't found yet. Okay. Good morning. So with that, welcome everybody. It's September 28th. This is a meeting of the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. As we get started, we'll start with the call to order and all the normal stuff, but I will be in the background. Go ahead and marking those individuals who are Climate Emergency Council members. So you see those names change. I'm going to make each of you a co-host as well, in case you need to do something like a share or something like that. But with that, I would say, Chair, you are welcome to open things up for us.
Great, thank you. So with that, then let's go ahead and open today's Ventura County Climate Emergency Council meeting for September 28th, 2021. And this meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically, and it's in response to the declared state and local emergencies due to the novel coronavirus and limited public access to the Hall of Administration, consistent with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. This Ventura County Climate Emergency Council meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically. And so with that, let's go ahead and have the roll call, please.
Councilmember White.
I'm here.
Councilmember Ferris. Chair Munoz-Schnapp.
Here.
Councilmember Kesley.
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Here.
Councilmember Gurrola. Councilmember Hernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Councilmember Chavez.
Yep.
And I know we're taking an oath, so by Councilmember Ontiveros.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And would Councilmember Maggie Kesley, would you do us the honor of leading us through the Pledge of Allegiance today?
Sure. Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, then we do have an oath of office for incoming Climate Emergency Council member Dina Ontiveros. And so Alejandra, would you do us the favor of doing that? Thanks.
Yeah, we have Sue who will be administering the oath.
Okay.
Hi, it's actually me, and I apologize for being a couple minutes late. I had a little technical difficulties, which seem to be my MO. So, hi Dina, welcome to the group. I am going to simply say I, then if you would fill in your name. I will read the rest of the oath, and then if you just would either say I do or yes at the end, that would be very helpful. So if you could raise your right hand, please.
I have a question.
Sure.
You're not going to make me get up at 4:45 a.m. and run for 2 miles after I do this, right?
This is news to me. I would never make anybody run unless a gorilla was chasing you.
The last time I did this, I ended up being in boot camp.
I would never do that to anyone.
Okay.
We have to talk offline about that story, evidently. Okay, so raise your right hand. I state your name.
Dina Ontiveros.
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. Please say yes, or I do.
Sure, yes.
Thank you. And we'll be sending you the form to sign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dina, for joining us. And although I do need to acknowledge that both Councilmember Barola and Councilmember Ferris were most likely not going to join us today, but you have joined a prestigious group of volunteers for the County of Ventura. Do you want to give us a little bit of your personal background and information for the group?
Okay. So let's see. I'll start with my grandma. My dad's mom was born in the Colonia. My dad was born on C Street and H. There used to be a hospital there. My mom is from Mexico. She was an immigrant. She worked for the County of Ventura for 33 years, and I was a second generation County of Ventura employee. I've retired. I worked for the County of Ventura for 24 years, mostly in social services. I had hoped to work in the environmental sector. So when I went to college, I had 3 majors: history, anthropology, and environmental studies. I had hoped to get into environmental justice, but because I had a supportive family, I ended up being a social worker again with the Ventura County Area Agency on Aging. But I'm an expert in long-term care as a result of the work that I've done. But I am also the president of the Nyland Acres Mutual Water Company and have been for several years now. I live a sustainable lifestyle as best as I can. And anybody's welcome to come to my humble little home in Nyland Acres to see how I live, because we have composting, we save water, we have chickens and turkeys, and we have a little lifestyle that shows people how to live in a sustainable way. And I was able to avail myself of the state and county programs to help me buy a hybrid car. So I do the best that I can to live and walk the talk of being an environmentalist. And I really enjoy hiking up in the mountains and doing Aztec dance. And I am a practitioner of Native American spirituality. So that's what I bring here. That's it.
Well, thank you so much. And sounds like you have a plethora of experience that you could then share with the group, and your presence is going to be wonderfully engaging, as well as just your activism as well. So thank you so much for joining this group. Okay, so let's move on to the approval. Item number 5, approval of minutes from the August 31st council meeting. So I entertain a motion here to approve the minutes.
Travis moves.
Okay, so Travis moves. Is there a second?
Hernandez second.
Who was that?
Hernandez.
Okay, thank you, Terry. All right, so motion has been had moved and seconded. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do a roll call, right? Yes, correct. Okay, so we'll do a roll call then for your vote. Thanks.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Chairman No Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Kesley,
Yes.
Councilmember Ramirez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin,
Yes.
and Councilmember Chavez.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So then let's see, we move on to item number 6. And this would be for public comments for items not on the agenda. And so I believe we did have a comment or two. There was maybe one comment here and then another comment for an item on the agenda. Is that correct, Clay?
What we actually had was we had an additional comment that was received this morning that each of the council members should have received by email. And that was for agenda item 10 because it's related to the study session item. We do not, staff has not received any items that are not on the agenda, so public comments. But if someone in the crowd has a public comment they'd like to make now and wants to do the raise hand feature or however works best for your chair, they're welcome to do so.
Okay, so then we'll entertain any public comments for those that are on the call right now that would like to make a comment on any item that's not on the agenda. We reserve this time during the agenda for the CEC meeting in order to take public comments. So you could raise your hand and take yourself off of mute if you had any comments. And so I'm going to scroll through my screen to see if I see any hands raised or anyone from the public that wants to speak. I don't see anyone that has raised their hand. And if you as public want to make a comment on any of the items that we're going through, then we'll go ahead and take your comments during the rest of the agenda. All right, so as we didn't have anybody here, let's move on to item number 7. And that was for correspondence received from Council Member White from September the 7th. So Clay, go ahead, and do you want to explain a little bit further about this one?
Sure. So correspondence was received from Council Member White. He asked staff to distribute that to the rest of the Climate Emergency Council. And you've received that. You don't have to take any action at that time, but if you would like to give space to Council Member White to comment on what he's sent around to the group, you're welcome to do so.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and have you, Council Member White, make any comments for what you had sent. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sylvia and Clay. I don't know if you've all had a chance to read the email that I sent to the CEO's staff. It kind of followed up from our last meeting where, if you recall, I was urging that our council do more than the green stickies, that we be invited and encouraged to bring forward to the council any and all ideas that should be presented to the Board of Supervisors for taking action on climate change. I want to just take a minute to read something that you guys have all received. And this is out of the report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, where they recently described, I'll read this, how humans have altered the environment at an unprecedented pace, and detailed how catastrophic impacts lie ahead unless the world rapidly and dramatically cuts greenhouse gas emissions. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called the findings a code red for humanity and said societies must find ways to rapidly embrace the changes necessary to limit warming. He said, there is no time for delay and no room for excuses. I know that I am very personally committed to doing what I can to address climate change where I live here in Ojai and within Ventura County and beyond. I assume that all of the members of the Climate Council are also motivated to be strong advocates for control of climate change, doing something to address climate change, or we wouldn't all be on this council. If we don't feel that way, we shouldn't be on this council and should be replaced by people who do feel that way. Again, to summarize, I was urging and I will continue to urge that the county staff, CEO staff should be encouraging our council to come forward with any and all ideas on what the county can do to address climate change. I think it's very important.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember White. All right, so let's then move on to our regular agenda, and we are now on item number 8. So we'll hear an update from the County Executive Office. And with that, then we'll have Clay Downing present.
Great. So actually, one of the first things I wanted to do was point to Sue Hughes. So Sue, would you like to give the group an update on where we're at with the email addresses that we had mentioned before? And if we're ready to send those around, or if there's a step or two first?
I believe, unless something has happened in the last half an hour or hour or so, that every member of the council, so all 10 of you, will have a @ventura.org email address. So first name, period, last name @ventura.org. We thought that this would simplify correspondence for all of us here in the CEO's office, as well as all of you. Then you're not using your personal email, because oftentimes we're familiar here with Public Records Act requests. So it makes it a lot easier if all the correspondence is for the VCCEC, is to please use the @ventura.org email. But one thing we want to caution in conversations, of course, with County Council is that you don't reply all and don't send emails to everyone. We don't want to have a Brown Act violation. But we will be corresponding with all of you at your @ventura.org email address. And those should all be, unless something has changed in the last hour or so, Clay, I think those are all ready for prime time, right?
That's my understanding too.
Okay. All right. So everybody's got an email address.
Okay. And I will follow up sometime between this meeting and the next one. I will send more detailed instructions on doing those, because one of the things I don't want to do is roll out these emails and then somehow have things get lost in the shuffle. So I'll send out kind of instructions on how to get those started. For a short period of time, I may consider using both of your emails, the one you're currently using that we have on file, as well as the new one, just to make sure they work. But pretty quickly, we just want to switch to one so that it's not redundant. So that'll be the plan. But details will go out to those council members.
Okay.
Other update items. One, there have been some updates to the VCCEC website. So if you look at the resources webpage that's on there, then you'll see that a number of resources have been added to that page. And so one of those we're going to mention in agenda item 10. It's called a policy viewer. And so it's something to make it a little easier to do some cross comparison on some of the policy topics. And we'll talk about that more in agenda item 10. And then one of the other ones I wanted to mention was, if you remember, we mentioned CAPCOA, the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, and their 2010 publication related to mitigation of greenhouse gas quantification related to mitigating GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions. There is a draft document that's created, that's been created and is getting called the GHG Handbook. And it's by the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District. But if you read the objectives for it, it is intended to essentially be a comprehensive update of that 2010 document. And so for this group, it seemed like that would be a particularly valuable resource. I've started going into it, need to look into it more closely, but everything on that resource page is intended as a link to where that resource actually lives. And so if they stop working for some reason, if some people please let me know, I'll update them. I can also add additional resources if we feel things are valuable and objective and need to be part of the work that we're doing, they can get added. So just make that request to me and I'll do those. But I think that new one, that's this GHG handbook that's created, I think this group will find that it's valuable. Next is the budget and staffing plan for CAP implementation. It's part of general plan COSDD. So we were shooting to have that go to the Board of Supervisors in September. We have been unable to make that date. We will be going sometime next month. It's not currently on the agenda, but we're hoping for October 12th. But we're getting to it as soon as we can. It's taken a little bit more time than we expected to get some of the information that we needed from all of the different agencies involved. But I think this council will be very pleased when you can get an update on that, because it's going to have the costs, it's going to have some of the other resources that are needed, and it's going to have some of those program status updates for all of those programs that are in the general plan and the climate action plan. And that is it for my update.
Okay, thank you, Clay. Are there any questions from council members for Clay? Yes, go ahead, Council Member White.
Yeah, just a quick question for Clay. In the proposed budget going to the board, is there a line item for technical consultants to help with the climate action plan?
It's program by program. So in some of those programs do require technical consultants. Did you mean for the Climate Emergency Council specifically, or something across the board?
For the climate action plan in general.
I would say there are probably several places that call for technical consultants, but yes, one of those would be for the overview and oversight side of it.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Clay on what he's presented? Okay, so seeing none, thank you, Clay, for the update. And let's move on then to item number 9, which is to receive a memorandum on procedures for the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council recommendations. And we'll go back to you then, Clay, with that.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I don't have a presentation on this. This was in response to the motion that was made towards the end of the meeting that we had last month on August 31st. And I basically tried to walk through kind of a step-by-step of what staff would expect from a procedural standpoint for this council in formulating and making a recommendation, it coming to the council as a whole from whatever source that might be. In this memo, I expected that would come from either a single member or from a temporary advisory council that's formed by this council. So those are the two most common ways. I'm sure other ways could come up, but tried to put in a few items on what you could expect, what you might consider as fulfilling what's been required as far as creating a recommendation to the board that addresses quantifiable greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And then the next following steps would be that the recommendation from the Climate Emergency Council pursuant to the resolution and the bylaws goes to the Planning Commission. They do not get to change that recommendation. They simply get to receive it, consider it, and if they would like, make their own recommendation to accompany it to the Board of Supervisors. And then the VCCEC recommendation would go forward to the Board of Supervisors. And if the Planning Commission has made a recommendation to accompany it, it would be presented in addition to it. But again, not changing anything coming from this council. And so those would be the steps. And then depending on what the board decides on that recommendation, a variety of actions could be taken. I would mention that the memo relies on primarily the bylaws and the resolution for the Climate Emergency Council, as well as a section of the procedures for the county that are adopted by the board related to the making of motions. So an action taken by this council needs to follow those same procedures.
Okay, Thank you, Clay. Any questions or comments from the council? So you can raise your hand or take yourself off of mute. Oh, yes, go ahead, Councilmember White.
Yeah, I have a question. Clay, to follow up the email I sent and the comments I made in the last meeting, is the council invited and encouraged to come forward with any kind of recommendation?
It's so broad the way that question is asked that I'm having trouble saying yes to it. So the council is invited to fulfill the bylaws and the resolution that are adopted by the board. They don't say, bring forward anything you want. They say, bring forward recommendations related to achieving our goals for making reductions for meeting our own goals and targets for our climate action plan. So from that standpoint, it's somewhat limited because there is a scope that's given to this council through that resolution, through those bylaws. So it doesn't say anything. And the other thing it says is that it needs to happen as a body. And it says that it needs to happen through a motion and through a consensus of all of those members, rather than a single member coming forward as a representative of the board. But it should be the board taking action, or not the board, the Climate Emergency Council taking action as a body.
So there are no particular limitations on what we might do?
It needs to be related to the climate action plan. It needs to be related to meeting the goals and targets of the climate action plan.
Great, that satisfies me. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I see our Vice Chair, Daniel Chavez, have his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Thank you, Clay, for that presentation. I guess I'm just kind of confused, and this kind of touches on Commissioner White's letter that he had forwarded to all the council members. I understand this body is still very, very new. And I would agree to a certain extent with Councilmember White that we need to be doing more. All we've been doing is kind of back and forth talking and no real action. And I do not believe that we're being effective or efficient as possible. The county as a whole is not new. Our county has been around for a number of years. And throughout those years, we have had a number of boards and commissions and advisory groups come. I'm just trying to figure out as to why is it that our council is kind of on a different wavelength than all the other advisory groups. We know what our goal or our scope is supposed to be. So I'm wondering why we don't have staff coming to us saying, here's our items for today. This is what our presentation, this is what staff's recommendation, council, what is your guys' views and stuff like that. I don't know how you would respond to that, but I just feel like there should be more efficiency with our time. All of us are volunteering, and we all want to accomplish and ensure that our county is being very proactive when it comes to climate change. But I just feel like we're not doing more that we should be doing. So I don't know if you have a response to that, Clay, and I apologize for dumping that. That's kind of a loaded comment, but I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, Councilmember Chavez, I'll try and respond as best I can, but I'm not sure I heard a question in there exactly. I would say that your body, this council, is created and given direction similar to many of the other advisory bodies throughout the county's family of agencies. So from that standpoint, it is fairly apples to apples. But this council is unique in that it's addressing climate change and addressing the climate change emergency and helping the county and its agencies deal with it. So that part is unique. As far as why certain things aren't happening a certain way, these committees and councils and commissions are created to make decisions and to be advisory bodies. But to the best of my knowledge, at least my observation would be that this council has not made a decision on what you want to work on yet. And so we're waiting staff is waiting for the council to decide where to put that work effort and for its council members to come forward with some of the recommendations, or at least those requests on what specifically the need is, the goal is, the thing to work on, and those program and policy recommendations. So those are what needs to come forward. I think we've talked about it in a handful of meetings since I've started in June and been pretty clear that it's about sub-program recommendations, perhaps policy revisions, and those sorts of recommendations, and that they're going to be related to the climate action plan. So for that standpoint, I think that direction is pretty clear that we're working on a climate action plan. We're suggesting modifications to it as needed so that we can really do a better job of meeting those goals within that climate action plan in whatever form that takes. That could be something that's broad and community-wide. That could be something that's specific as far as the work that's done by a general services agency or the resource management agency or the county executive office. So those things, it's really about making a decision. And so, for example, the study session that was held during the last meeting, and that we'll talk more about this meeting, that was intended to help your council make a decision or multiple decisions so that you can move forward with that research. But those recommendations, staff will help formulate some of those things, but it's on your council to come up with those recommendations. It's not supposed to be staff drafting things and then, shoving them down the throat of this climate emergency council. We would be happy to help provide information, to help provide suggestions and those sorts of things. But this is intended to be a citizen advisory council. So we are trying to be careful about shoveling things towards this council that are really just what staff thinks is a good idea, because it is supposed to be input from the community and the members on this council as representatives of that community.
I appreciate that, Clay. Sorry, Sue, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry for interrupting. That's the trouble with Zoom. And, on behalf of the team here in the county executive office, I appreciate the comments that are being made both by the council members and by staff here. We want to do our best to help the council select the things that the council wants to work on behalf of the community, as Clay said. And I'm hoping that we can get there today based on the next exercise, so that each member of the council will have something they're interested in working on. And then that moves us towards, here's something tangible we're going to work on. Here's something tangible we can at some point report on. And I'm hoping we get there today. So I appreciate all of you. I know this is a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so we very much appreciate the volunteers. And let's see if we can't get there today. So there's actually tangible tasks that everyone will volunteer for. So thank you.
I appreciate that responses, and just to wrap up my comments, I understand that from our last exercise and what our goal is to accomplish today is that we can't tackle every single thing today. We have to prioritize. And I believe taking the top priorities, and I believe the exercise from our last meeting clearly show where the priorities are for many of the council members. I believe we need to start exploring those. I do have one final question, Clay, and this kind of touches on to what Councilmember White said. There is nothing that says that a recommendation can come sooner to the Board of Supervisors, correct? There's nothing that says that you have to wait until 2022 for a recommendation. Am I right about that? You're on mute.
I believe the language is no later than 2022. So it is not a you must wait. It is a you cannot go past this. You must happen before that time. So Councilmember White and all the other comments before are correct. No one is suggesting that this council wait until 2022. However, that is the lowest standard. That is the latest we want to be. And we do not necessarily want to be as late as possible. No one wants to show up to the party late. So I don't think this council does either. And I don't think that's been suggested by staff. Frankly, I don't think it's been suggested by anybody on this council that it be as late as possible. I think everyone's in agreement based on everything that I've heard thus far that we would like something to move forward sooner rather than later.
Sounds good to me, and I appreciate that clarification for everybody so that there's no confusion moving forward, that those recommendations can come forward, and hopefully we, as Ms. Hughes said, get something so that we can start digging our teeth into. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know, I think from the very beginning is that we knew that the ultimate date would be before the end of 2020, but it didn't say that we had to wait till then. It was where at least there would be recommendations needed by that time. And so any time between now and then is effective. This is a new council that was formed. Usually when they take a look at these kinds of issues, it has been a report that was generated outside of the general plan. This is the first time that all of this was integrated within a general plan. So there's a lot of moving parts, but there's a lot of really new, interesting caveats that we have to tackle. So with that, then I see that Councilmember Kesley had her hand up. So go ahead, Maggie.
I wanted to ask a question, Clay, that are we going to, as a group, look at where the greatest impacts can be made, as opposed to just these specific areas that I believe you guys, and I apologize that I had to jump off of Zoom at our last meeting. So I did miss a lot of discussion. So if I am asking a question that's already been answered, I apologize for that. But I was looking at the data that was put together by Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District. And it seems that there was some great information there that gave us some clear idea of where we could have the most impact. And I wanted to see if we are going to be identifying and looking at those specific things, like something such as carbon farming.
So Councilmember Kesley, thanks for your comment. And I'm also happy to follow up with you or anyone else that's missed portions of meetings. So I would say that there is no single way for me to make an apples to apples comparison about all of the policies that are currently qualitative and make them all quantitative now. That is the crux of the problem that we're in and that this council has been asked to deal with. So as a proxy to that, the exercise that we used last week was intended to say, where are emissions currently coming from? What are the different ways or sectors that we could deal with those sorts of things? And then try and start honing in on things and priority interest then based on those policy topics. Because some of these policies that we have, the 60+ policy topic, the 60+ qualitative policies, are broad in nature, and there's nothing measurable in there for us to figure out what that impact is going to be, how many things they would be related to, what the rate would be for those sorts of actions. We can't measure them, so you can't do a side-by-side of all 60 or 60+. But we can go forward trying to get an understanding of where we think we have the most potential for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and then co-benefits for things like climate adaptation that happens alongside those greenhouse gas emissions reductions, or things that really stimulate our economy as well as do greenhouse gas emissions, or help with solving or bolstering some of the equity-based things that we want, promoting public access for communities that might not have had access to the public process in the past, those sorts of things. So we don't have a side-by-side that's readily available for Ventura County and for our specific policies because it doesn't exist. And that's why we're doing this work. But the conversations that we've been having so far are those intended to help us figure out what areas we want to work in so that we can figure out where do we think that greatest opportunity lies. And then as the research goes in and as this council selects topics that it wants to deal with, whether that's building energy, whether that's agriculture related, whether that is transportation, then we can start doing measurable things. We can find apples to apples case studies for the actions that would be related to those policies potentially. But we need to get closer to those so that we can find those measurable outcomes.
And then one more just follow-up question to that is that in our looking into all of this, are we also going to be studying the impacts that some of these policies may have on disadvantaged communities? Because if there's an issue for me that I want to make sure we keep at the forefront, it's what the cost is going to be to the people who we say we are trying to protect. So I want to know that that's going to be a part of our goal, because I don't feel I could be responsible in making any recommendation to the Board of Supervisors until I truly understand the impacts. So
How your council decides to proceed is at is at your discretion of your fellow council members. And so
Okay,
if that is important to you, then, and it is important to your fellow council members, then that can be how it's addressed and to be one of those things that is evaluated and amongst those recommendations.
great. Because I'm seeing where we could find ways where we could have a great impact with reducing greenhouse gas emissions without taking away or making it cost too much to those people who would be harmed by it at the disadvantaged communities. So thank you.
Of course.
Okay, any other questions from the council for Clay? Yes, Councilmember Baldwin.
Following up on the Santa Barbara thing, I've reviewed that and their list is somewhat limited compared to ours. That doesn't mean it's bad, that's just that we have a lot more things to look at. Santa Barbara also includes some things that we probably can't look at, although I personally would like to, like the shipping lanes. There's an incredible amount of NOx reductions that can be made there. But I think that part of what Santa Barbara did might add to what we're trying to do. I also think that what we're doing on our entire list ought to be prioritized for Ventura County as to where we can get the most bang for the buck, the greatest emissions per, the greatest pounds of emissions reductions per dollar, so to speak, and as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Clay on this item?
I think Councilmember Ontiveros had her hand up at some point a little earlier.
Okay, and then I see also Councilmember Remedies. So we'll go with Councilmember Ontiveros and then Councilmember Remedies.
Ontiveros, A at the end. Thank you. So I understand this is a huge agenda. I was going through everything, and I understand that everybody has questions about how we're going to implement such a huge agenda. But my question is, when can I talk about ideas? That's my basic question since I'm new.
Sure. So I would say that in two ways. So one, I think that the council members leading into any meeting can always bring up any idea that you want your fellow council members to discuss, to dive into. Also, agenda item 10, we're continuing that study session that was from last month. And so the whole purpose of that is ideas. How is this going to move forward? How are we really going to start working? And how are we finally going to make a decision that lets people dig in, do research, start creating recommendations on those ideas, and not only write that recommendation, but hopefully, depending on the pathway that the council members decide to choose, perhaps work together in small groups to make sure that those policy recommendations are grounded in something that is quantifiable and resources that we can point to and say, this is valuable. And I know this because I have this source to say that it's effective in this way or to this extent.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Councilmember Remedies.
Hi, everybody. You know, I'm really excited about this meeting because I can tell we're right there. We're there to start, you know, digging in. I think, at least for myself, I could speak for myself that the last few months has really been just about getting a handle about what this is, what is the cap, what is it that we're being asked to do, and I'm still, you know, processing in terms of what is the best way forward. But as long as the momentum is moving forward, and I can tell that today especially we're going to be moving forward, that is what's the most important. I also want to just clarify for both myself and just, you know, just making sure, because I feel like some of the anxiety maybe about this in terms of are we going to get this right, is that we can make several recommendations throughout this time frame. So yes, we want to think about what are those getting more bang for our buck type of in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but also this understanding that we are doing this all along the way, and we're going to just keep getting better and better and better at it as we start to dial in and have an understanding. So I think for this first session, to kind of make it more, to have that kind of a lightness coming in, to know that this is just the beginning. we're just getting started, and we will get better at this. I know we will get better at this. So, and just kind of in terms of throwing out things that we haven't really talked about, and I would like to talk about, is just methane gas emissions. If we're talking about getting more bang for our buck, I don't really see that in here in terms of where that is with our oil and gas, also with the methane of composting, of the fact that we don't have a composting program here in Ventura County. So there's also some other things I want to just put in there, but understanding that we have 2 years that we're going to be dialing in on all of these things. But I do want to feel and encourage each of us to utilize this as a space to start brainstorming those ideas. Like you were just saying just now, I love that, Dina, how you said, okay, when can I start saying my ideas? Like when can we start doing that? Because I do feel like this is a collective space for all of our experiences that we can each help each other to inform, to bring our experiences, and just to push this momentum forward. If we all have that same mission of, yes, we care about this, yes, we care about well-being for this planet in our county, and yes, we do know that it's an emergency, and yes, we want to move our agendas forward of how can we be of service. And this, it just comes back to me, how can I be of service? So anyways, I'm excited that we're beginning today, and let's begin with some good energy around this.
Great summary. Thank you. And then I see Councilmember Baldwin, your hand. Go ahead.
So I'll help Councilmember Ramirez get all excited more about the recycling side. I've been communicating with a company down in Paris that as late as 6 o'clock last night, so I obviously couldn't get anything here, but they are taking composted materials and making it into natural gas for fuel for vehicles. Well, if you use that compost as a fuel, then, and they're the only one in California, maybe the US, I have a lot more to learn, then you're displacing what would come out of the pipeline, so to speak, as a fuel for the same vehicle. So that reduces methane overall. But I got a lot more to learn, and that's something I was actually going to go to a workshop on this tomorrow, and then I realized I was going to be gone. I was going to be traveling 7 hours and gone the rest of the day, and I thought, I'm not doing that. So Clay doesn't pay me enough to go down there for that kind of stuff and drive in LA traffic. But there are things that are happening, and in my particular world, the air world, I keep my eyes on things. And I'm going to bring things forward as I can, and when I find them, and I just need to flush this one out a little more. Maybe by next month, I'll have something to share.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Remedies.
I love that you brought that up, of just the research that you're doing. And the thing is that we all are coming across different research. And I wondered, what is the way that we can share these things? And I know like there's this kind of blockage of the Brown Act. So of course we don't want to, and I think in some ways we feel, especially those of us who are new to this, kind of feel like of not doing anything or sharing anything just because you don't want to do anything that's wrong. You know what I mean? So I think if we had maybe a place, maybe it's like some public place that we could share information, what would that look like? Because to me, this is cross-pollination. How can we help each other so that we can inform these webinars that are coming up, these best practices that other cities are doing? Because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to bring these ideas of best practices that are happening in other places and bring them here. And I think that it would be great. Like, so I don't know what is the path forward. Go for it.
So I'd like to make a recommendation that we move to the next item, because what Councilmember Ramirez is talking about to me is exactly related to what we're talking about on that next item, those next steps types of things. But in response to what you were saying, Councilmember Ramirez, a couple of thoughts that I've had as a pathway for your council is, one, if an individual is doing individual research, wants to bring it to the rest of the council and share it, you can do that simply by emailing staff. I'll coordinate with the chair. We'll get it on the agenda. That way you've got a way to get there. The next item that would be is these temporary advisory councils or temporary advisory committees that have been created per your bylaws allow this group to get together in a place, and those meetings are not controlled by the Brown Act because they are less than a quorum. And that less than the quorum is how we ensure that we're not violating the Brown Act and how the public is not excluded, because they're a work group so that you can get together with your fellows, have kind of your working group, and when you're done with your task, bring it back to the group at large, which ensures that that information is also brought back to the public. So that's both the safety procedure, the keeping it less than a quorum, as well as that work item, so that you can share, so you can work together, so that you can use your diverse experiences to really make some differences. So those would be the two things that I would say, is that you can put it on the agenda, you can create these tasks, and then I would also make the suggestion to your council that perhaps we go ahead and officially say that we're off, because we don't seem to be talking about it anymore, particularly agenda item 9, and we officially move to agenda item number 10, if you're ready to do so.
Yeah, so let's make sure that we wrap up then with agenda number 9, because that's where we're at. Any more questions for Clay or staff? So I don't see any other hands raised here for the council members. So let's go ahead and close out item number 10 and move on to we closed item number 9 and we moved to item number 10, which is the continuation of our study session and our future action items. So with that, go ahead, Clay.
Okay, so the way that Chair Schnapp and I discussed the agenda earlier was that I'm going to do a very, very short presentation on what we heard from the last convening that involved the study session. Staff did develop a few recommendations to put in front of your council, and your council can decide whether you care for those or you do not care for those, and then decide how you would like to move forward. And then after staff presents what's in the memo that you've received, we'll go ahead and if there's any public comments, which there are a couple, then you can receive those and then open it up for a continuation of that study session. Chair Schnapp, is that still how you'd like to proceed?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share. We'll keep this real quick, hopefully less than 5 minutes, certainly less than 10 on this. So, all right. So what we have here is just a continuation of that study session from last week. There were 2 major items that I wanted to highlight in there. So the study session results, your group received a summary of those as part of your agenda packet, but I would say that some of the highlights for that are shown here on this slide. So this is a comparison of that prioritization exercise. I think we can all acknowledge that all of the sectors are important. All of the emissions in Ventura County are important, and they're important in different ways. So this is not to say that the research interests and opportunities for reduction that got fewer votes are not important. It is just trying to hone in on where we think we are comfortable focusing some of our initial efforts. And so here in this voting exercise, you see that the sector related to agriculture is at the left side of the slide. It's got just a few more areas of interest for this council, both from the respective where that research interested is, as well as what we think the reduction opportunities might be. And then it goes down the line to solid waste, building energy, transportation, and then into kind of a holistic look at all sectors being important. Then when we looked at the policy topics, not that these are the only things that your council is allowed to work on, but that these are ones that we know are already qualitative. They're in our cap, but we can't rely on them to get us where we want to go. And so what we're looking at is that prioritization exercise with agricultural waste reuse at the top. And then actually the next, I think it's 4 of the next 5, might be all 5 of those, are all transportation related. So you see regional bicycle infrastructure, you see transportation control measure programs, permeable pavement. That's more of an infrastructure, a little less transportation, but there's a bit of a touch between the two. EV charging stations and alternative transportation modes. So those tend to have more of a transportation focus on them. So as a broader, less defined interest expressed by the council, but that was how the voting exercise went. So these figures they're formatted a little bit differently, but they're in your agenda packet too. And then based on those exercises, based on other things that are explained in the memo that your council received, staff is making these 4 recommendations for you to consider. And if you want to move forward with these, fantastic. If your council discusses and chooses to go a different direction, obviously that's at your discretion as well. So we would 1 suggest that there's a temporary, so I'm going to say TAC, but I'm referring to a temporary advisory committee. So form a TAC focused on agricultural topics of soil productivity, agricultural waste reuse. Number 2, form a TAC focused on transportation topics of electrical vehicle infrastructure and deployment. 3, form a TAC focused on creating evaluation criteria for consistency in evaluating proposals to the Climate Emergency Council. And then 3, request that staff identify and invite guest speakers to future meetings on topics of interest. So the memo, and this is all the slides that I'm going to be presenting today. This is my last one here asking for questions. But all I would say is that the memorandum that you received from staff goes into each of these and explains them briefly, but explains them. And so these are largely based on what we heard at that last meeting, as well as looking at some of the resources and some of the other items, either related to Ventura County that might be available programmatically in terms of elevating the feasibility of these research areas, so that we think will be helpful. So with that, I am done with my presentation portion of this, and we can move to public comments if your chair is ready.
Okay, yes, so let's go to then public comments. If there are any that want to speak, we'll take those that want to speak first, and then the consideration, I think, of the one that we have received, correct? Yeah.
And
Okay, so I see. Go ahead.
I was going to say your council has already received the 2 letters, one from Todd Collard, one from Luis Lampara, and I do see that Luis Lampara has her hand raised, as I think Chair Schnapp was about to point out.
Yes, okay, thank you. So go ahead, then we have public comment from Luis Lampara. Go ahead. And we reserve about 3 minutes or so if you'd like to make your comments during a period of time. Thanks.
Great. I'm not going to take the entire 3 minutes. I don't really have anything fancy prepared. I just want to thank you, you guys, for not just the opportunity to comment, but you are putting in a lot of hard work and trying to herd cats, for want of a better term, figure out which of these policies is going to take us the furthest. And, committee member White shared a quote at the beginning of the meeting, no time for delay and no excuses, which is why we at CoLab think that the development of a clear and transparent process, once you have a few ideas that you think are worth pursuing, to evaluate those ideas and policies and programs, so we can quickly and openly identify which actions give us the most return to address the climate emergency. You don't try to put out a wildfire with a glass of water, right? We need to know what will give us the biggest bang for the buck, as has been said earlier. We're very excited, as in the staff report, to see the interest that this council has, and that they recognize that there's a lot of opportunity in agriculture. And the Santa Barbara APCD spreadsheet that was mentioned earlier today does indicate that there is a very effective climate action program that Ventura County can take advantage of, and that's carbon farming. Our agricultural heritage could very well be the very program that saves our future. And given Ventura County's focus on and respect for the agricultural community, it could allow Ventura County to become a leader in climate change action. Carbon farming is already a policy that the county is going to support carbon farming. That's already in the general plan. It's already in the climate action plan, and we already have the farming community in place. And just to respond to Council Member Ramirez's question, I believe there's even a compost and mulching pilot program in place at the county. And that's something also that could be expanded on and information could be gathered from. And I'll just wrap it up just saying that, you know, I really encourage this council. It might be a fantastic discussion and learning opportunity to invite APAC, the Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee, along with members from the Ventura County agricultural community to a future climate emergency council meeting. And have an open conversation and let's talk about how we can move forward quickly on what at least the Santa Barbara APCD has identified as a very effective climate solution. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And then I see Roseanne Witt. So Roseanne, go ahead. You have about 3 minutes for your comments.
Hi, first I'd like to appreciate every single council member for your commitment to tackling this daunting task. As a volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby and the Conejo Climate Coalition, the common denominator I see as I speak before my city council, the TO Planning Department, my state and federal representatives advocating for ambitious climate policy to meet the challenge of the climate crisis at the scale and within the timeframe science demands is a maddening lack of urgency. This month marks 1 year since this council was approved, and it's only now beginning to discuss proposals. As Chairman White mentioned, the IPCC's report says that to stop additional warming before we lose the ability to reverse the damage that's already been done, we need to immediately cut fossil fuels. This month, the editors of 200 of the world's medical journals, including the highly respected British Medical Journal, The Lancet, and the New England Journal of Medicine, took the unprecedented step of simultaneously publishing a joint statement regarding the destruction of our natural world and the need to cut global greenhouse gases before we reach effects that are impossible to reverse. They warned of the consequences that will breed more conflict, food insecurity, forced displacement, and zoonotic disease, with severe implications for countries and communities, no matter how wealthy. Also this month, a study of 10,000 teens and young people in 10 countries links the reality of climate change and government inaction to high levels of psychological distress. 2/3 of students surveyed feel sad and anxious, over half feel angry and powerless. 8 in 10 anticipate a frightening future, saying adults have failed to care for the planet. 40% hesitate to have children. 2/3 think governments are lying about the effectiveness of actions taken, leaving our youth feeling betrayed, abandoned, and distrustful of adults. Ventura County's average temperature has already increased 4.7 degrees, making ours the fastest warming county in the continental US. Within 20 years, that average is projected to rise 3 to 5 more degrees in Ojai, Tio, and Simi, and it lasts at least 2 to 3 degrees more in coastal areas like Ventura and Oxnard. As Supervisor Parks stated when the Climate Action Plan was passed, climate change is happening rapidly, and we need to move rapidly also. Every ton of GHG emissions and every degree of warming we fail to prevent means more people will die in the future as well as in the present. We need to take responsibility, and our kids need to see adults pushing to do more. To that end, I echo the calls that I've heard today, that the CEC, your council, be briefed on the progress of all CAP policies and programs as first requested some 3 months ago now, so that the CEC can suggest informed improvements to policies and programs adopted. I also urge you to immediately implement the REACH code on electrification and the gas ban in new construction established in the county's climate action plan. And I also—
Rose, I just want to let you know you're past about 3 minutes. So if you could sum it up in a couple of sentences, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
My last request would be that you post recordings of these meetings on the CEC website so that residents who have day jobs can also follow the proceedings of this critical body. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments from the public at this time? So I'm going to scroll through my screens here. All right, so I don't see any others. So let's go ahead and then as we did hear presentation from Clay, are there any questions? And Clay, would you mind putting up the recommendations, what you had on your PowerPoint for us on the screen? And
Absolutely.
any questions for Clay from the council? So you can raise your hand. Okay, so I see Councilmember Remedies. Go ahead.
I don't have a question for Clay, but I do want to thank Roseanne Witt. I've not met you before, but I do appreciate the passion and the emotion that you bring to us with all of the statistics, because it's real. This is real, and it's true in terms of how our young people are processing it. And I think it's important for us as the adults in the room to remember that what we're carrying, that we're carrying really the future decision, or the decisions that we make and how we decide to proceed is impacting those behind us more than it is us. So I think it is important for us to recognize that there is incredible anxiety amongst young people. And I know this because I have 3 teenagers that live in my house. And so I know how they feel when the IPCC report comes out, and how it just feels daunting and like there is no path forward. And so what we're giving to them, and I hope we keep that spirit with us, is this understanding that the way that we've conducted business as usual needs to end. Like this is time to think outside the box, for us to take risks in the way that we're thinking about it, to not be beholden to any, whether it's ag, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's whatever are the big sectors in Ventura County, but rather to see the whole picture and to keep those statistics that you shared with us, Rose, at the forefront of this discussion. At least I will, because that's what we're doing this for. That's why I'm spending my time right here, right now, is because I am holding those statistics of these young people and the world that I know that they deserve, and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. I mean, the stakes are high. This is not your usual committee. The stakes are high, and we do need to remember that. And I thank you for reminding us, and please remind us. We need those reminders so that we continue to move this momentum forward.
Okay, and then yes, Councilmember White, and then followed by Councilmember Kessler. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, I just want to reiterate the concern of young people. I had a conversation last Sunday with my grandson. He's 7 years old. He knows all about climate change and is concerned about it. We do need to act. Looking at what's on the screen here, staff recommendations, I'm in favor of all of these things. I would like to add one more. Clay, are you able to do live edits to your screen like I've seen you do at the Planning Commission? I would add.
Yeah, I can do that. That's not a problem. Let me just do a quick save as so I don't mess up my only copy, but I can absolutely do that for you guys, for the council.
Clay is really good at this.
Clay's not that good at this, but he'll try and keep up. So go right ahead. I'm ready when you are.
Well, it would be form attack focused on the things not included in 1 and 2. On topics not included in items 1 and 2.
Okay.
And because I know that we talked about more things than agriculture and transportation, there are more things that we need to discuss on this council. And if we're going to have tax, let's have one that looks at those other things. And I would move that we adopt this as modified.
Okay, thank you.
One item that I would like
Councilmember.
to point out, the bylaws indicate that each council member can only be on one TAC at a time. So if you start getting over two technical advisory committees, you start limiting the number of people that can be in that given working group. So that would be the one area that I might just bring up or caution.
Okay, so I saw then Councilmember Kesley, I believe, and then I see Ontiveros and Remedies. So we'll go in that order. Go ahead.
Great, thank you, Chairperson Sonia. Valencia, I just wanted to tell you thank you for all of the comments that you've made so far today. And I agree with you on the one that you did say, where we kind of have to leave our personal preference of where we want to focus aside and come to this table united to say, what things can we work on together that will create the biggest bang for the buck, using that terminology again. So I wanted to thank you for that. I want to keep circling back to the tax, because for me, there is a sensitivity to making sure that whatever information that is gathered in these smaller groups is something that the public is going to be comfortable with when we share what comes out of it. And if the TACs are going to be bringing in their own experts to speak to those smaller groups, I know for me, it would be, I would not want to rely on the perception or the interpretation of those facts being presented from a group as opposed to hearing the expert testimony myself. So I would also believe that the public would feel that same way. It would be important that I would have access to hearing from the experts set aside from just the committee members of each individual TAC. And then it makes me wonder, are we going to be redundant and wasting time by having all of these smaller groups instead of just working on this together, brainstorming and listening to expert testimony? So that's my question.
Okay, and then let's see, we had Councilmember Ontiveros, and then Remedies, and then Councilmember Baldwin. Go ahead.
So thank you for allowing me to speak, and thanking everybody for their great comments. I was not here for the last meeting, and I apologize for that. But what I've been thinking about is we have a huge problem here on our hands with regard to climate change. And so I see here that there's technical issues going on, that we need to adopt programs for addressing actual technical problems, the actual energy use, greenhouse gases, things like that. But we also have another problem on our hands that I see nothing here that is being addressed, which is culture change. We have a consumeristic culture where having things is more important than having relationships, and having a relationship to where we live, which is the earth, trees, animals, plants, and how there is reciprocity in energy. We release carbon dioxide and we breathe in oxygen, but the trees uptake it and then they grow. So there is definitely, we are part of this system, okay? So we're not addressing that at all in any of this, and it needs to be addressed, because what we need to do is let people know that not only are they themselves, I myself, part of the problem, and I need to change, and that we need to empower everyone to have a hand in it, to say, okay, it's not just you, it's all of us and me. And so we need to figure out what we can do to get that message out so that people don't say, oh, it's your problem, or you know what, the rules don't apply to me. Yes, we have rights, but we also have responsibilities, and we each need to take a responsibility in this issue. And how do we make an effective marketing campaign so that people can know that they can be part of the solution and make very small, specific, doable recommendations, not just in English, but also in Spanish and other languages, so that we each take responsibility and then educate the public about how our individual actions can change that. An example, every time I buy a product, it's not just the product, it's the product plus 4 different boxes that product and the packaging has. What is that doing? It's contributing to landfills. I'm sick and tired of buying stuff that I need or want, and it has tons of packaging. How do we change that culture? How do we stop people from thinking it's cool to get a box and then you're just going to throw it away? So I'm saying that what we need to do is have another way of having culture change, not just in this county, but in other places, and have that disseminate out so we each take responsibility for our actions and figure out how we can better live in this world.
Right ideas for some marketing overlays on our on what comes out from our discussions. So thank you. So go ahead then, Councilmember Remedies, and then Councilmember Baldwin.
I have all these ideas jumping through me, just listening to each of you. It's just, one of the things that Council Member Kesley, you had talked about, and it's something that I've kind of gone back and forth with, and I'm, you know, I definitely am putting it out there is for all of us to kind of think about what is the best path forward in terms of us being the most effective. Is it to have these TACs where essentially, to me, it's kind of like breakout committees, right? Where we're not necessarily having, I didn't understand it as having invited guests or speakers or experts. Well, I guess we did talk a little bit about that, didn't we? At these breakout sessions, but maybe is the best path forward to have all of us continue to tackle one of these at a time, having experts come in and talk to us, for us to each gather information and have these sessions where we're exchanging ideas in the way that we are now. And then from there, you know, breaking it down into recommendations, and then we can vote on it. So I can see both ways, both paths. And I'm putting it out there for each of us to think about of which way do we feel like we would be the most effective to be in a quorum or to not be in a quorum, essentially. And would we be missing a lot if we're not all together kind of thinking and contemplating these issues together? I don't know. So I'm putting that out there. I really love what you're talking about too, Commissioner Ontiveros, about embedding within all of these things that the education, right? The connecting with community so that we're not just doing this all in isolation. I think that's really important for us to be continually to think about in all of these things. So when you were talking, for example, I was thinking about, because I also went to the Santa Barbara website after I read that letter, and I did see, you know, the idea of having urban forests, for example. So then I had this, like I had imagined, well, the first place to put it to me seems, let's do an urban forest in front of the county building, like have that be the model place of how do you begin. And then you could bring, and I'm just putting this out there as ideas, right? Then you have this urban forest, you have the community coming in and being a part of the planting of that forest. You could have all of these nature-based climate solution workshops happening. So any opportunity that we have to embed, which is all with everything that we're going to do, is embedding that education piece, because you just don't know where these seeds that we're scattering with any of these things, how they land on different people with their own gifts and beauty, and what they can then drive as a result of it. So that's what we're also doing here. We're also we're scattering seeds in all of these policy decision recommendations that we're making. And then within that implementation, that's how I like to look at it. So anyways, those are two thoughts that I had.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Remedies. So then we go to Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you. So I have no problem with the first four actions. It makes a lot of sense. And I understand, I think, what Phil's trying to get to with 5. However, you're going to form a TAC, focus on topics, plural, not included. Well, we have, what, 26 or something items to look at potentially in the plan. And a TAC needs to be focused on probably no more than 1 or 2 things at a time. Because you're going to have 1 or 2 individuals, you're going to have some outside people that are experts in the area, like say someone from the agriculture industry. That all makes sense, but then how do you form a TAC that takes on a half a dozen or a dozen things? And so the way that's worded troubles me because you can have 2 or 3 people dealing with 25 things at once, and that's probably going to be insane. I just don't see how that can work the way it's worded. But I like the first 4.
Okay, thanks. Phil, before we go to you, can we go to Councilmember Hernandez? Because I know she's had her hand up. So go ahead, Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes, I would like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we would form a TAC for the agriculture, that we could use the community and the farmers and make a joint. How can they come together and do a joint program?
Was that you were in agreement with what's on the staff recommendations is number 1?
Number 1, yes.
Oh, so you like that? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Did I miss anybody else before we go back to Councilmember White? Okay, so I'll do Councilmember White because I saw his hand raised next, and then Councilmember Chavez.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. Well, the reason that I added form a TAC focused on topics not included in agriculture or transportation is because there are emissions of greenhouse gas emissions, greenhouse gases that come from sources beyond agriculture and transportation. For example, buildings. I'm happy to not have tax in general and have the discussion of whatever comes forward to this council be considered by the entire council. So I'm happy to do that as well. I figure if we're going to have any tax at all, well, if that's the way forward to have technical advisory committees, then we need to be sure to have one that covers things beyond agriculture and transportation. Now, maybe since any one of us is, as Clay pointed out, can come forward to the council with recommendations, maybe it's not important to have what I suggested, as long as that can happen.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Vice Chair Chavez, and then going back to Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had to switch devices, had to pick up my daughter. I'm okay with the recommendations from staff. I believe the 2 big things that we did talk about were transportation and agriculture. Of course, there was 3 other topics that we also discussed during our last meeting. in keeping in line what Councilwoman Kesley mentioned in regards to tax and how public they are, and you know, I'm going to reiterate what I said last time, was that I don't feel it's appropriate to have these tax and they're not beholden to the Brown Act. I believe the public should have an opportunity to participate and speak. And I only bring that up just because, as myself sitting on the Oxnard Planning Commission, we had a subcommittee, less than our quorum, and it still falls under the Brown Act. It was recorded, it was public, had opportunities to speak, and it was a working session. It wasn't necessarily any actions that we were taking other than recommending to the full commission. So I just want to make sure that when we develop these tags, that we do allow the public to be able to, one, participate, to provide their feedback. And I understand that, you know, Brown Act says less than a quorum, you know, you don't need to have it follow the Brown Act, and they can't have set meeting dates. But I'm okay with the recommendations for 1 and 2. Unfortunately, I'm not okay with Councilman White's recommendation, action number 5, because it goes back to our discussion last meeting, where we're not narrowing it down. We're just trying to tackle everything at the same time, and that's unrealistic. I believe focusing on the top 5 that we all selected during our last meeting, I think will be beneficial. It gives us a starting point, and then as we progress, we adjust as needed. But if there's no, actually, I'll go ahead and save that last part just to see if there's any additional comments from any of the council members. But those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. So Clay, did you have an answer back directly on this first before we go to Councilmember Baldwin? Go ahead, Clay.
I did. And your council is welcome to make your own kind of guidelines for how you want to handle the tax. So if you would like to make it so that it's done by Zoom and the public can attend, and you want staff to go above and beyond what the noticing would be required to do, we can do that. But if you start exceeding what staff can keep up with, we're going to have to tell you that we can or cannot do it based on time constraints. What we really want to do is have these tax so we have working groups. I don't know if anyone in this council has noticed, but we haven't received any policy recommendations yet. And so the tax are intended to get us there. And so it's a bit of a give and take. I understand that people can be uncomfortable with these tax. Your council can basically decide how you want to do it. If you don't want to have outside speakers there because you think that some people are getting information that others are not, that would be your own approach. It's not in the resolution or bylaws. If you want to agree that they'll be on Zoom and people can attend if they feel like it, and that your members are comfortable doing that, that's fine. I would recommend that perhaps be something you consider as part of the TAC that's doing evaluation criteria. You can make it evaluation criteria and procedures or something like that, something targeted. But I really do feel that it is important that your council start trying to move forward with a work plan. And that's why we came forward with these recommendations, because it was somewhat what we heard. The other thing I wanted to circle back with Council Member Ontiveros, she mentioned the equity and culture change. The way that you grade things can be part of that culture change. And so you can essentially grade for that like a co-benefit. So do you get extra points if you're doing those things that lead to that desirable culture change? So that would be another kind of a function of that sort of attack or work group. Alternatively, I'm going to take up just a little bit of time because your council really is getting a little snug on time on this, because there's one more agenda item that's related to picking your next meeting dates. And it's important that we have time for those before we lose people. The other thing I wanted to add was that if council members, however, essentially want to adopt a single policy and then bring back what you heard, staff can kind of keep track of those report backs so that you're making gradual and incremental progress on those various topics. And if that's one of those policy topics that we explicitly have from COSLL, or that we have as a general plan policy that doesn't currently have implementation, go ahead and say, you know, fellow council members, I'm going to go ahead and look into this. I look forward to reporting back soon. I don't even think there's a motion needed for that. It's a motion when your council decides to take actions. So there's a lot of ways to slice it, but I would really say that it's important to find that way to move forward, to feel that urgency. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Clay. And then I did see Councilmember Baldwin's hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So Phil threw out an idea when, about buildings, and in this catch-all tack, number 5, action 5, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me that we can, as we move along and decide that a topic is of great interest and is high priority, that we can add an item. So Clay, maybe you can clarify that for me, but it seems like this is, what we have here is a starting point for really 2 tacks, and we can add tacks as we move along for each thing that we've decided is going to have some benefit, and we ought to move forward on it.
Councilmember Baldwin, you are correct. So the tax are not permanent. They function only as long as they're useful, and then they're erased. So they are not intended to be an ongoing committee. When they've done their research, they're intended to be disbanded and no longer function. So basically, you would form a TAC, conduct the research, report back to the VCCEC at large, and then it's done. And you can make that a motion or just kind of track that, but that's how it is written in the bylaws, that you only get to participate in up to one TAC at a time as a given council member, and that they are not intended to be ongoing and broad. They are intended to be for a specific thing, conduct their function, and then end.
And we can create them at our desire.
And you can create them as needed as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Councilmember White, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. A couple of comments. If we adopt it the way that staff recommended, with a attack on agriculture and attack on transportation, that would infer that this committee has already concluded that reducing emissions from agriculture and transportation are the very most important things to do. I know in the city of Ojai, a little more than half of the greenhouse gas emissions within the city of Ojai come from burning natural gas in buildings. So if we're not at some point going to be addressing energy use in buildings, we're not doing our job. Again, I'm happy. I know Daniel's very worried about the Brown Act, and I guess I am too. We want to be doing everything possible in public. There is a lot of public interest, and maybe we don't have any tax at all, and anything that that needs to be discussed, or that a member or a couple of members want to bring forward, would be able to bring it forward to the entire council. But if we're going to have an agricultural tax and a transportation tax, don't we need a building tax? Don't we need an oil and gas methane emission tax, et cetera?
All right, thank you. You know, you bring up some questions, and I know we have at least Councilmember Ontiveros, who is newer. We did the exercise, and so I think, Clay, if you could go scroll to the previous slide, I believe, that has, yes, thank you. So the reason why the staff was recommending this is just because of this slide, is that they were able then to categorize, group some into specific categories, although, you know, there's a few other things that are necessary maybe for us, but this was based on our voting for priorities during our study session. Yeah. Clay, did you have any further description of what this slide was all about, the gathering from the notes?
This slide was simply a count of that, if you recall, the sticky note exercise that we were doing. So this in and of itself is not making a statement, it's just reporting the actions that, or the opinions that were voiced through that exercise. But it was intended as a prioritization exercise. It is hard with limited resources to study many things at the same time. And similarly, if you have many TACs at the same time, you will be spreading those council members that can participate a bit thinner.
Yes, Councilmember White.
Clay, could you go back to the previous slide that shows the vertical bar charts? Agriculture, solid waste, building energy were the three topics that gained the most research interest. Somehow we ended up with agriculture and transportation on your recommendations, when in fact solid waste and building energy had more interest. And that all sectors are important, had as much interest as transportation.
Staff's recommendation was based on multiple things as written in the memo. And so some of that included both the votes that the VCCEC took, as well as what were perceived co-benefits and opportunities for study. So if your council does not agree with those, that is perfectly acceptable. And you're welcome to study what you think will be most important. But I would take the opportunity to say that this council has about 10 minutes before it needs to move to the next item, which is essential because it's the setting of dates for the next 6 months. You have no further dates on the calendar at this time. And so in the next 10 minutes or so, it seems important, if you would like to go ahead and at least set those next few steps in motion, regardless of what those are going to be, TAC formation or otherwise. I don't know as staff that I can really make the recommendation much stronger to you that if you really feel that urgency is important, then taking a step into that work plan is important as well.
Okay, and then thank you. And then I see Vice Chair Chavez with your hand up. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my feelings on it is that our tax need to be held with the Brown Act. So I would actually like to make a motion that a rules and procedures TAC be established, and that we approve staff's recommendations number 1 and number 2. So that would be my motion, that a TAC for rules and procedures be established, as well as accepting recommendation 1 and 2. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I know that there were a couple of motions before, and that was the original motion with Councilmember White, that then was item number 5, recommended action item number 5, that he's then suggested be redacted. And then Councilmember Hernandez also had a motion that she liked recommendation action number 1. And then now we have Councilmember Chavez with recommendation to then include the criteria to make some changes for how the tax are moving, which I think, would it sit, Vice Chair Chavez, would yours sit within action number 3 maybe, and clarifying that?
I was kind of wrestling with that, Madam Chair. Maybe if staff can just clarify, because I think I was looking at it and I was thinking that it might have fallen under that one, but I'm not 100% sure. So I don't know, Clay, if you want to take that one just to see if I was in line with recommendation number 3, or if my motion was completely different.
Well, I think it seemed like it was in the neighborhood. And so I guess my question would be, would the TAC that you're proposing to be focused, so it was for evaluation criteria. So basically that's evaluating the things that are coming back to the Climate Emergency Council. So would yours be for a rules and procedures, kind of like the bylaws and the resolution, and evaluating those, or is it really in evaluating how things come back to the Climate Emergency Council?
I believe it would be more in how the tax actually run, and then how it comes back to the full council. So I don't know if that falls in what staff's recommendation is?
It could be modified so that the TAC is focused on the evaluation criteria and work procedures for tax. So we can make it dual.
Okay, so I'll be okay with that, and then I would just modify my motion that it would just be 1 through 3 as a recommendation action.
The other thing I would just want to get clarification on is if Commissioners White's initial statement on recommended action 5, 1, was it a motion, 2, was it withdrawn? And then the second item I want to clarify is the statement made by Councilmember Hernandez was as a motion that appeared to be for motion action or to adopt a motion to accept recommended action 1. So that's still live. And I'm not sure what the status of the first statement from Councilmember White was.
Well, I can speak to it, Clay. Again, if we're going to have any tax, if we have one on agriculture and transportation, don't we want to have one on buildings?
I'm not arguing that. I really just want to get procedurally and make sure we're fair to everyone. So Councilmember White, you put in the recommended action number 5 to form a TAC focused on topics not included in recommended actions 1 and 2. Then the conversation continued. Councilmember Hernandez, her statement of support was in the form of a motion to support recommended action 1. And then there was further conversation, and we have a motion on the floor from Councilmember Chavez. So what we need to do, I think, at this point is untangle those.
Correct.
And so I'm not trying to modify the first action or any of the other subsequent actions. I'm just trying to figure out which ones are live, and I want to start with the first one first, if it was one.
Well, I would stick with my motion. I don't know if anybody wants to second it for discussion, but personally, I think that's the way to go. Either we don't have any tax, or we include one that covers things, that covers all things.
Okay, so then what I'm hearing is that Councilmember White, you are sticking to the original. You're not withdrawing that it wouldn't be a TAC, but because one of the other things we heard in your discussion was that it wouldn't be a TAC, it would be where the entire council, the CEC, would evaluate then those items that weren't plugged into those first action 1 and 2. So I'm hearing that that's not the case.
Well, I think that's a good way to go, Sylvia, that we not have tax, that we avoid the Brown Act question of committee meetings outside our council meetings and excluding the public. I agree that we should comply with the Brown Act and even lean towards that where it's not absolutely required. But if we're going to have tax, let's be sure to be complete.
Okay, so I see a hand up by Vice Chair Chavez. We have, just to let you know, we have probably about really only 5 minutes before we drill down into the next one. But I don't want to move off of this because there's actually 3 motions on the floor.
So
go ahead.
Chair, I would ask, is there a second for Councilmember White's motion?
Okay, so I don't see any hands raised or anybody.
So the second being to form a TAC focused on topics that are not included in recommendation, which could then include building energy, for example.
So what it is that, adopting the slate of what the staff recommendations are in addition to action item number 5. So that's what Councilmember White's recommended motion is, just so that you're clear about all of that.
Okay, so I do like that in terms of just having space to brainstorm other things that are not within the first TACT actions. And I think we also have to be reminded that everything that we discuss in these TACs, and I like to think of them more as working groups, that we're bringing back to our entire committee, and we'll continue to talk about them and get more expertise. So it's
Correct.
for me, it's helpful to think of them as working groups, right? So I'm willing to give a second on that motion, to have a space to think about other recommendations such as building energy.
Okay, so that motion was made and seconded, and then we should go through and have a vote, correct? So go ahead, Alejandra.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Chair Munoz-Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Kesley,
No.
Councilmember Ramirez,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Councilmember Hernandez,
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin,
Reluctant, yes.
and Councilmember Chavez.
No.
Is that everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like that motion carried. Okay.
Yep.
And so then what we have is recommended actions for 4 TACs. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And we do have a couple of other motions on the floor. And so how would we proceed with these?
I believe that the motion by Supervisor or by Councilmember Hernandez is now defunct because she appeared to be supporting recommended action number 1, and that
Okay.
has been accepted through the prior motion.
Mhm.
And then I'll be honest, I don't remember exactly. Oh, Councilmember Chavez
Yes.
was recommending a modified version of the recommended action number 3 that would focus on procedures for tax. It could be that motion. So that recommended action has now been accepted. If Councilmember Chavez was willing to modify his, he could propose to modify the TAC in recommended action 3 so that it evaluated, and then that would be up for him to fill in the blanks. It could be for evaluation criteria and procedures of tax, for example.
Can I please make one? I think you might have misspoken unless I misheard. I believe the motion on recommended action number 1 was made by Councilmember Hernandez.
That is true, but my statement was recommended action 1. That is probably defunct because I think that hers was to accept recommended action 1, and that's already occurred through the prior motion.
Okay, what I heard you say was Councilmember Ramirez. So
Oh, sorry.
jot this all down, and I just want to make sure I got that right.
You are correct. Sorry about that. I
Thank
misspoke.
you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so then it goes back to then Vice Chair Chavez to make a.
So, Madam Chair, my understanding of parliamentary procedures with the Roberts rules, because Councilman White's motion was moved in second, it kind of killed the other ones because there was no second. So technically, I would not be allowed to modify the motion that just got passed right now. A request for modification would have been done before the actual vote was taken. So I technically can't make any recommendations for an amendment that should have been done prior to the vote. I don't know if there's any staff that has knowledge about that, but that is my understanding of the parliamentary procedures. And this kind of just ends this item that allows us to actually move on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am okay with that correction. If Alejandra or Sue want to comment on it and see if that sounds accurate to you, then we can move on to the next item if Council Member Chavez is correct.
I don't know the answer to that question. This got a little convoluted.
I was going to say, without taking the time to look it up, I can't answer that question decisively. And I don't think that we realistically for this group, unless I'm afraid it'll run us over.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
suspect that Council Member Chavez is correct.
Yeah.
And if we are okay with Council Member Chavez's correction, then we can go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, if that sounds like the appropriate action to the chair.
Yes, before we move though, there's been a comment in the chat from somebody in the public, Cheyenne Richards. She said action number 4 is not worded as a formation of attack. I don't think it was intended to be attack. Action number 4, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so Cheyenne, it was not intended to be formed as attack. Thanks.
So,
All right.
and I will say that I'm hopeful that recommended action 4 will let me make sure that some of those experts that people were concerned about speaking directly at attacks, that won't be necessary. They can come speak to the entire Climate Emergency Council. And if there is attack working on that topic concurrently, that's just that much better. So that was some of the design there.
Great. Okay. So if anybody had like 1 minute that you wanted just to make any comments here before we move to item number 11, you can raise your hand. Yes, Council Member Baldwin, you have a minute. Thanks.
I'm just concerned about 5 where we might be taking on like 15 things with 1 or 2 people as attack. That just scares the heck out of me.
You know, I think what it does is that it allows us to move forward. And if we want to scale back, maybe that's an opportunity we have. Most certainly it does kind of.
The way it's worded, you can have a whole bunch in there.
Yeah, whole bunch of committees.
But again, we have to be reminded that all these ideas that we're having as these breakout sessions, we're bringing to all of us. And then we all will be looking at all of these ideas. So it's just kind of a catch-all of just an allowance of looking at things that are not falling within the structure of those other 2 topics, but saying, okay, we also are allowing for this other space, but we're all bringing it back. We're all bringing these ideas back to to the larger body. And then we'll be discussing them and adding to them and making them stronger, these recommendations stronger, by each of us looking at all of these ideas coming to the table. We just need to end the inertia and move forward, and then create these whatever we're going to do, we need to move forward with it.
Excuse me, can I just make it, so I'm trying to track everything and take notes. So if I'm understanding what the council just approved and following up on what Council Member Baldwin just commented on, we will now have 4 TACs, which would mean we'd have 1 TAC with 3 members and 3 TACs with 2 members each. And we are not yet at the point where we have names of council members who would be on those TACs. And I know we're really close to running out of time, and the most concerning part is next meeting dates. So I just want to mention that as a point of order.
Yeah, correct. Thank you, Sue. Yeah. Okay. So make sure that you write down that we have 1 TAC with 3 members and then 3 TACs with 2 members max. And so I would think that would be homework for us, and it'll be on the agenda for next time. So as we move away from item number 10, thank you so much for everybody's passion and concern and opportunity to speak, and giving us your feedback on this, because this is actually then starting some of this really grassroots and digging down deep, the work that we have ahead of us. So with that, then let's move to item number 11. And it is
Councilmember Schnapp, can we not just get ourselves on these TACs now and move forward?
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't intend for you to name what TAC. I just said, we'll park it on the agenda for next time.
No, I'm saying if there's the momentum to do so, can we just get on ourselves? I'm sure we all know what tack we'd want to get on at this moment, and then we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Florencia. I don't think anybody was going to be ready to respond. It's great that you would. I'm not ready. And we have 7 more minutes left, and I think we need to move forward on it and place it on the agenda for next time. That's what I would recommend. Sue, did you have something?
Well, I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to the council members if maybe individually using your new Ventura at ventura.org email, if maybe you email us here at the county with your, the 2 you'd like to be on. So then we can do a little spreadsheet and order them and see if we can't, if you tell us I want to be on number 1, my second choice is this, maybe we can help with that.
Okay.
And by the time we meet the next time, people will feel like they're actually getting down to real work.
Okay.
Great idea.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
So between now and then, thank you, Sue.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So let's move on then to item number 11. And so our next meeting is, we don't know.
Not currently scheduled.
We have changed, we changed it. We had changed this group from meeting quarterly, I believe, to knowing the urgency. And I remember Councilmember White mentioning that, is that why don't we meet monthly? And so we had set aside then time when most of us were sworn in and this group started, that we've been meeting monthly. But after this meeting, we don't have anything planned. And so I know Clay and I wanted to make sure that we had our future meeting dates, at least the next couple of months, identified. And we have looked at our calendar roughly, meeting when the supervisors are not meeting. And so we do have some recommendations. Clay, do you want to recommend what you have for us?
Yes, staff is recommending, and I'll go ahead and show a quick screen share of the dates that are recommended. So you've got it in front of you. But we're recommending a series of, let's see here, there we go. A series of dates that do not conflict with the current board schedule. They would still be for Tuesdays, and unless otherwise directed, staff will still plan on scheduling those for Tuesdays starting at 12 p.m. and typically going till 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And so we have dates there from October the 26th all the way through February 22nd, not taking any breaks for holidays, but just adjusting accordingly the week that we would be meeting. Typically, it's the last Tuesday of the month. So you could see that a few of them, we've moved that ahead because of Thanksgiving and then because of the holidays and Christmas and all during December. Yes, Councilmember White.
I would like to move that we adopt these proposed dates for our meetings.
I second.
Yes, so motion was made by Councilmember White to move, and then Councilmember Remedies seconded. Let's see, Alejandro, do you want to do a roll call vote?
Yes. Councilmember White.
Yes.
Chair Munoz-Schnapp.
Yes.
Councilmember Cassidy.
Yes.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros.
Yes.
Councilmember Hernandez.
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
And Councilmember Chavez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we have our next set of meetings that we'll go ahead and plug in. And with that, then let's make sure we have item 11B, councilmember comments, updates, and discussions. We have just about 3 minutes before hard stop at 2 o'clock. Councilmember Baldwin.
Just a comment, I'm going to be in the air when you have your meeting on November 23rd, but enjoy it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Councilmember Ontiveros.
Thank you for the welcome, and I hope we're going to have a productive and lively schedule of events. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? All right.
Great work. Great work, everyone.
We're moving ahead. Thank you, everyone. Great work, and we'll see you next month.
Great.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Good
Thank you,
meeting,
everyone.
Sylvia.
You were splendid.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
Right.
Thank you, Clay.
Thank you all.